on the building. It's a true foundation. I'm holding up the blood stain from love. I'm working on the building. It's a true foundation. I'm holding up the blood stain from love. I'm working on the building. It's a true foundation. I'm holding up the blood stain from love.
Welcome to the Under Construction Podcast. Join us as we discuss various topics meant to challenge your current ways of thinking. Today we have an interesting conversation for you on what is our topic tonight?
We talking about men's ministry.
Men's ministry.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into it. But first, let's introduce the crew. First, we have Cordell,
What's up?
AJ, and I'm T-Dub. Men's ministry. What are some thoughts on the current state of men's ministry?
So my experiences in the church, men's ministry has been great to me. Life-changing. If it wasn't for men's ministry, I don't know where I would be right now. So I actually was a leader in men's ministry for 3 years. So it's something near and dear to me because I know how important it is for me. So, but I think we'll get into it more, but it's different at every church you go to.
Sure.
So it's kind of tough to paint what they say abroad, like men's ministry is great all over. That might not be the case, you know what I mean? So I think we'll dig into it, but from my experiences that I've had, men's ministry is awesome for me.
Yeah, for me, men's ministry is a bit foreign, right? To that same respect. First time that I've been in a congregation with a strong male membership at all, and sometimes to me in my past, I felt like the men's ministry is a bit isolative, right? Coming from being in the world and trying to change your life into a different space and following Christ and having a believer's mindset. It can be isolative when you have to change your surroundings or the people that you were currently around or investing time with. And sometimes that can be a lonely journey. So I'm actually pleased in my current life where I have a strong men's ministry to be involved in and to invest in. So, I'm proud about that, but I'm interested to see where this conversation goes. AJ, your thoughts?
I'm dark today. So I think current status of men's ministry today is waning. I think in previous years, men's ministry was probably bigger and more affluent, more developed, more outspoken, more seen. Whereas today, I think men's ministry is kind of like snow removal. I think it's making sure the church is well kept. Not to say that these are bad things, but I think men's ministry, aside from like preaching, has been relegated to just kind of yard work.
Interesting.
In a lot of places. Not to say that every church is like this, because I know there are a lot of churches that have very strong men's ministries and strong leaders who do push forward men's ministry. But I think in a lot of churches that I've seen, a lot of membership in men has been limited.
Yes. So the question I would ask is, why is men's attendance in churches diminished over this time, right? And I was listening to a podcast before with Dr. Eric Mason, and they were asking him that same question, like why does men struggle with even being in church? So some men just feel like it's a feminine, church is feminized, right? And I love what he said. He said, they were asking him about masculinity in the church.
Right.
And is it accepted? He said, okay, the question I would ask you guys is, we have to define masculinity before we ask that question. Because we can't put a Western concept of masculinity on a biblical concept of masculinity.
Agreed.
Right?
Okay.
Agreed.
So we look at worship. Some of the songs in worship, they can seem like a feminized, right?
Okay.
But David was a worshiper.
Yes, he was.
And it's the same dude that killed lions, tigers, bears, Goliath, to over 10,000 men.
Right.
But in the same page, he was over there crying and weeping to the Lord.
Right.
That's masculinity.
Right.
Yeah.
But in a culture that we live in today, that can be seen as feminine.
Right.
Sure.
So it's important for us to define what masculinity is in the church, separated from what it is out in the world, right? Because we can see the red pill stuff, what they consider what masculinity is.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Making sure you got money, making sure you got, which is good things, because
Right.
I believe
Not bad.
there's some positive in that. Making sure you're healthy, making sure you got you're healthy, you're going to the gym. I love that aspect of it. But there's toxicity on the other side too.
Right.
So I think it's important for make sure that we pinpoint what is masculinity in the church and define that. So
Yeah, sure. For me, when I think about masculinity in the biblical realm, I think I have to look at Jesus.
yes,
Right. He lived the right way. He was wise. He sought counsel from his father, which means he isolated himself quite a bit.
Yep.
Almost to the point where you could almost say that he was selfish, in the respect that people knew that he could provide any and everything, right? He could heal people, but he also took time to go isolate himself and be with his father.
Yes.
Which speaks to the importance of that relationship,
Right.
but also not just being a people pleaser, because if he was in the space of being a people pleaser, he would have just done all the miracles,
Yeah.
right? But in order to do that, he had to be strong as well, right?
Right.
So how well can you do something with no sleep?
Right.
How well can you do something if you're not fed? How
Right.
well if you can you do something if you don't take the time to be sound as an individual? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
so would he have been able to do all those miracles? Absolutely. He was Jesus.
Yeah.
But
Right.
he understood that even being Jesus, I'm in this
Flesh
physical form. I'm in
Yep.
this fleshly body, which needs rest.
Yes.
And he took that time to give himself rest. So I think
Yes.
when I look at what masculinity is, I have to look at Jesus to be my representation of what masculinity is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree. Jesus is a perfect example.
Yeah.
And I think the knowing self-control, knowing how to take time for yourself, and knowing that that's not a bad thing. When you were speaking, what I was reminded of is when Lazarus dies, because Jesus loved Lazarus. He loved Mary, Martha, Lazarus. Like, those was his people. Those were his closest friends. And when he had to wait for Lazarus to die, that had to be a tough choice to do, knowing that your goal or your destiny, what your father is telling you to do, is to wait, even though you know what's getting ready to happen.
Yep.
Like, that's got to be tough. Like, especially like if I know, like we talked about this in a previous pod, like the difference between helping somebody and enabling somebody. Like, if I know that I can help you, but I know me helping you is going to enable you to do this again and again and again and again, maybe I have to have the strength, as Jesus did, to say, you know what, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait to see what you do. How do you come out? Where do you turn to when you need help? Because maybe you need that tough love, because tough love is a real thing. Yeah. And not to say that it's the absence of love, not to say that everything is tough love, but some stuff needs to be tough love so we can develop and go into the place where God needs us to be. So Jesus was showing us multiple things. Also, Jesus does get angry. It's not like Jesus doesn't get angry. He got mad when they were selling stuff in the church house.
So I think
in the
that's
temple.
been one of the struggles with men in the church. They hear Jesus is love,
Right.
love, and that can be sometimes seemed as feminine. But number one, if he didn't love us, then that's a problem.
We wouldn't be.
Right.
We wouldn't be.
Right. But also to see that God is a God of also wrath. You know
Right.
what I mean? God is a God of order.
Right.
God is a God of structure. Like, these things are things that also he called us to do.
Right.
To be order. And I mean to be disciplined is the word I'm looking for.
sure.
Because when I look at men in the Bible, one of the characteristics that, is consistent, especially with Jesus, is discipline. Right? What is the assignment that God called you to do?
Right.
I think that's going to define what true masculinity is.
Right.
Am I completing the tasks that God has called me to do, right? First, as a disciple of him. Am I doing that? Secondly, if you're a husband, are you doing that?
Right.
Also, as a father, are you doing that? Whatever God has called you to do, are you fulfilling are you disciplined in each one of those things? Because what happens is when we're not disciplined in doing the things that God has called us to do, we end up doing stuff we ain't got no business doing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think to bring it back, I think that's why men's ministry is important, especially for the younger men, not even younger men in general, is because it's a way for us to build up one another. Mm-hmm. And I'm huge on that.
Yeah, I think the benefits of men's ministry is the fellowship as well.
Yes.
I think God called us to be in a collective, to be together.
Yep.
And walking a faith walk is going to be challenging. Mm-hmm. It doesn't always come at you the way that you would want it or the way that you expect it. So we're going to need wise counsel. And having a men's ministry is knowing that you have people that you can trust, that you can count on, hopefully a mentor that you can look up to, and also hopefully some new believers that you can bring up to your level, right? So you have the difference in knowledge base, right? So you can always ask questions, you can learn, you can grow, but also you can just spend time with one another.
Yes.
As I was saying previously, sometimes when you become a believer or you change your life to a faith-based walk, it feels isolative because you're moving away from all the things of the world that you've done and all the people that haven't made that decision to follow you in the respect of giving your life to Christ, right? So if you have that community and that ministry that allows you to get together and talk about God, share your thoughts about the word, understanding that you need to read the word so that you know who God is, right? Because how can you follow someone if you don't know who they are or what they believe, right? So the importance of all of those things is the benefits of the men's ministry.
I was listening to Dr. Mason again, and he was talking about men's ministry. He said, we have to make it an effort, just to go off what you said, to focus on men's ministry. Here's the reason why. He said, you felt isolated, yet you were in a place of community.
Yeah.
Right? Men are not driven to go to, they're not event driven. Mm-hmm. Right? Your church is doing this event. Your church is doing this event. Mm-hmm. You can go and still feel isolated. Yeah. Men need small community.
Right.
They need that interaction. I think that's just how God designed us because me personally, I get more than going to a men's ministry meeting than I do on a Sunday morning. That's just me personally because I'm getting to know you. You're getting to know me. You're getting Sunday morning, we're just going to hear one person.
You want fellowship, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what I was going back to. I think men need fellowship. And if you're just coming on a Sunday morning and you're not getting that fellowship, you're going to feel isolated no matter what.
Right? Absolutely. And like you said, iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
Right? So it doesn't say iron sharpens nothing.
Yes.
Right? So I need something to be able to, sharpen myself against. And we need other men to, brother, the way you're going about that is wrong. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Thinking about like marriage, we were talking about last week, like being in a place where godly men are having godly relationships and they're like, listen, I'm struggling with my wife in this aspect, help sharpen me so that I can go into a better relationship with my spouse.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So just being in a space where you can share and learn and also be vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
So there's a space for men to show vulnerability.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
sometimes it's more comfortable to do around other men.
It is.
Right.
Than it is to do it around females, right? Because women could look at us a different way, or our perception is that we'd be judged by a woman by not being a strong masculine man, even though we have all the same feelings, but we just utilize them in a different way.
Yep.
I think that speaks to the importance of different dynamics. The Bible talks about the young and the old coming together. He said you'll use the young for their strength. You'll use the old for their wisdom. Going back to something that you said earlier, which is biblical. We have to understand that everybody has a purpose. Everybody's here for a reason. Yes. And if we have different dynamics, yes, you have the older person that can give you wisdom. All right, cool. Maybe you know a way to do something. But maybe the person that's older or maybe the person that has more skin in the game has an easier way or a way to make it even easier than what you've been doing. Maybe they have a method that you can utilize that, all right, cool. Like what I've been doing gets me to point A. And I'm cool with just getting to point A. But what they're doing gets you to point J because of how simple it is. You know what I'm saying? Maybe just changing a little bit or change, you know what I'm saying? So going back to the iron sharpening iron, not necessarily meaning that we're always going to butt heads, but it's important to butt heads so we know what it looks like, how to go forward after you butt heads. How do I now address this in a respectful manner, or get experience from someone who's already been there? My grandfather used to say, trying to get there can't tell been there how to get there.
Yeah. I've heard that one as well.
So just understanding that, like, there's people that have already been in your situation, not necessarily specifically, not exactly in your situation, but have been in something similar, or they've been in their version of your situation. And they may be able to help you. They may be able to give you some advice that will prolong what you're trying to keep, but you don't know how to. So yes, it's
and I believe there's also value in new believers questioning.
Absolutely.
Right? Sometimes we've been so deep within our faith that someone comes along and they're asking questions from a perspective that we haven't thought about in so long because we're so deep in our walk. So the freshness of their perspective and the newness of what they're experiencing can refresh, you know, our thinking, right?
Absolutely.
So it's not always the elders who are always the wisest, right? Sometimes it's the new believers who can shine a fresh light on an old perspective and help to change it and grow.
I'll go a step further. I'll say there's even new believers that bring up conversations that you've never thought of. Like you've never considered. And to your point, that could be a blind spot for you where you've never even considered this could be an issue. And now you look at it and go, oh, wow, I've never... All right, now I get an opportunity to fix something that I was just neglecting because I didn't know. Ignorance is bliss. Like, and it's important for us to have that fellowship so we can be like, all right, cool. Like, this is how you do X, Y, and Z. Then they bring up an interesting topic. You're like, okay, I don't have to have all the answers. You know what? Let me research. Let me go back into my Bible. Let's read it together. Right? You know what I'm saying? Because now you're teaching me something as a new believer, and I'm getting to dive into the word a little bit deeper. And then now we both get into this better relationship with God, knowing that, all right, cool. Like we can learn from each other. It doesn't have to be a one-way thing.
That's why it's so important for youth and newer believers to be in the church, because where there is no new youth or new believers, there's no life.
Agreed.
There's no life. If you're not bringing anybody in, and there's no youth in the church, when y'all gone, so is the church.
Right.
So it's important for us to embrace what the new believers are bringing in, as long as it's staying within doctrine, you know what I mean? Like, you know, but also I heard KRS once say, and as one of his phrases, he said, when you are older and you hang around younger group, you become the fastest among the older people.
I'll give you that. Yeah.
And he said, and when you're younger and you hang around older people, you become the fastest among younger people. Because you're gaining, you're in the older circle, but when you go back to your circle, you're more advanced.
Right.
And it works the same way for the elders. You've been chilling with your grandkids and they done showed you how to use all this technology. When you go back with your elders,
your peers,
you're more advanced than they are. So it is important for us to embrace one another as far as generations within the women and men. Because there's challenges that the young men that haven't dealt with the things that we've been through, but then there's things that they're dealing with that we never had to deal with in today. But our wise counsel would still be able to benefit them.
Absolutely.
Know? That's a valid point. I think I'm going to hit a detour real quick.
Do it.
So going back to Jesus being the model of masculinity. Right. So our first question is, if Jesus were to lead a men's ministry, what would that look like today?
It looked like just the way he led the men's ministry in the Bible.
I think so too.
He had the first men's ministry with his 12 disciples.
We gotta describe it.
So for people that don't know what that looks like.
All right. So I mean, Jesus, when he let's put it in an urban context, right? Okay. So when Jesus went to chose his 12 disciples, and I think the key thing is he had to go get them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, where they were.
He had to go get them where they were. Mm-hmm. Right. It wouldn't change today.
Right.
Right.
So in that context, would we be looking for a men's ministry that started in the church and stayed in the church, or would it be more community-based, let's say?
Ooh, now that part I like.
So I got my thought process. I think it's more community based. I think Jesus, the way Jesus did things was to your point, he went and found them where they were.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hey, they were already fishing. It wasn't like he told them, let's go fishing. Mm-hmm. They was already there.
They all had jobs.
Right.
They was doing
Everybody
thing.
had jobs. Everybody was already doing their thing.
Yep.
And Jesus says, hey, if you want, I can make you fishers of men. Like, instead of just like the woman at the well, like, all right, you're looking for water. I know a water that never runs dry. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, he met them where they were and then addressed their physical problem first, which is what I love about Jesus, because he doesn't ignore what their problem is.
Yeah.
The first, when he meets, I think it's Peter, Simon, and I can't remember his brother.
Was it?
I'm trying to remember if it was Simon and John or together. I'm not sure. Yep. Not sure which ones they were. But when they're trying to fish, the issue is they're
James
not
and John together.
James and John. My bad.
Yeah, but same thing.
So when they're fishing, they're not catching anything first. Mm-hmm. And then he tells them, cast your lots on the other side. They're like, yo, we've been out here all day. Yeah. All day. You don't even fish. You're a carpenter's son. How are you going to tell me how to fish? But they was like, you know what? Just for ha-has, let me do it. Flip it over. They catch all the fish. I think it was basically, their net broke. Like, that's how many fish they had. Mm-hmm. Like, it was just like, it was something that was a miracle.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then Jesus says, listen, that's not it. Like, I can make you fishers of men. Like, this is nothing kind of thing. Like, he addresses their physical need first, and then he goes into their spiritual need. And I think that's the blueprint that Jesus would have today. Like, all right, cool. Like, you're struggling. You need a job. You need whatever. You need clothing. I'm going to address this first. And then after I address this, now I'm going to address your spiritual need. Yeah.
I think I'm going to go both. Because you said, would it be more community-based or more in the church? Mm-hmm. Jesus is the body. He is the church, the head of the church. So how could it be, you know what I mean? But his goal is for us to go out.
Correct.
Same thing he did with his disciples, right?
Correct.
So let me get them. Let me disciple them, teach them. All right, y'all out of here. Right. I think it would be the same motto today. He's going to go out, get them, bring them back to the church where they can get the tools that they need, and then send them back out where they need to go to be impactful citizens and spread the gospel, right? Because the whole goal is for them to spread the gospel and for the church to continue to grow, you know? So I think, and he gets the glory out of that. So I think it would be, to what you were saying, I think it would be a dual aspect, you know what I mean? I don't think it would just be one or the other.
What do you think, T-Dub?
I think that's very true. I think you go into the community to seek out the disciples or the new believers, but you have to bring them in the church to teach them, right? So I think it's a dual aspect, and I like the way that feels for me. You know, to go out to be a fisher of men, right? You can't fish in the house. You have to go out. You have to go where the fish are.
You gotta
You have to go out to the sea.
In the house.
You know what I'm saying? So you have to go out to where the people are. You know, but in order to do that as well, you have to be living right.
Yeah.
Right? You have to start with a clean house within yourself. Your body, your temple has to be clean.
Right.
Because who are you to lead anyone back to Christ if you're not fully sound yourself? And I don't think we're ever fully sound, right? You know, it's always a work in progress. But if you're taking the steps and trying to lead a life that is pleasing to God, I think people will see that.
Yes.
And people will know that. But it also has to be consistent. It has to be transparent.
Yep.
Absolutely.
You know.
And I think if Jesus were to have a men's ministry today, It would, even though it would be the same model. I think it could look different because of the times that we live in, right? Like it would be, they didn't have some of the tools that we have today.
Right, sure.
So I'm just thinking out of the box. You know what I mean? Just like how would it be in a social media? How would it be in a social media age?
Somebody's streaming.
We getting all the miracles, right? Yo, look, Jesus is live.
That's wild. Jesus is live.
Jesus is live. But I think it would be interesting if it was today. But
Ooh,
go ahead. What you got?
I got an interesting question. Detour. How many people do you think would watch if Jesus had alive?
That's a
Because I'm like, I think some people I think at times we go to a nose blind kind of thing, like where like we see it so often that we don't reverence it as much.
Yeah.
So like if Jesus was here today and he went live, maybe he goes live every Tuesday. Like how many people would tune in every Tuesday? Like I think that would be interesting.
That would be. I think there's value in the fact that he started small.
Yes.
He could have had a mega church if he chose to,
Right.
but he chose 12.
Yep.
And
Very
I
true.
think that there's importance to that.
Yep.
Because when you start small, you really get to know one another. You really get to build familiarity with one another.
Right.
And you really know what the other people in your small group are thinking and feeling because that's an intimate space. But before you start to, send those 12 out to start discipling other people, you know that they're sound. If I'm trying to disciple 10,000 people, and I'm asking them to go out and start their own disciples, how do I know 10,000 people, right?
Right.
So I think like when you're looking at it and you're saying, Jesus did it right.
he did.
He had the choice. He was Jesus. He could have done anything. He
did.
But
Very
I think it's very specific that he started small, right? Like if it was a campaign, it'd be a grassroots campaign.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He started walking around, and honestly, he started with children.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then he went and found his disciples, right? But
think-
he first was a teacher. He started teaching
At the
children.
temple.
I think that brings a whole different dynamic because sometimes when we are leading churches, we become focused on numbers and not focus on growing people spiritually. Bro, if I was a pastor of a church, I am a pastor at a church, but if God sent me 20, I'm gonna make sure we got 20 soldiers.
That part.
And if he said, what if God said, I'm not sending you no more than these 20 people?
Right.
Would
What
you
if-
be satisfied with that?
That's the question.
Like, would you be satisfied?
I think 20 is liberal. What if he gave you 5?
What if he gave? But what if he gave you 5?
I think to T Dub's point, like start small. The Bible says, "Fret not the day of small beginnings." So basically, like things are gonna start small. Like maybe, like we're fathers, we're parents. So like we already technically have a church. We have a priesthood that we minister over,
Yes.
which is our household. So I have 4 at mine. So I got my wife and I got my 2 kids. Like, and that's what I'm responsible over. But to your point, what if God says we're not going to multiply? What if you have this church and God says, no, right now you're only responsible for them. Make sure they're tip of the top. Make sure they know all the stuff that they're
Because
supposed
there's
to know.
one of them that I want to get 200 from.
Right. You don't know.
You know what I mean?
Like
So
you maybe you just got the blueprint, but they're supposed to lift it up higher kind of thing. So yeah.
and Jesus, we know that Jesus did everything, and we don't do everything that Jesus did, but he did say there's greater works that we can do.
Greater
you know
works
what I
than
mean?
these shall
Not
you
saying
do.
that I'm going to walk on water and anything, but the number of us, and we have the capacity to, Jesus set up, because he was leaving to go with his Father. What did he do? He went from him just impacting people. He gave all of us the Holy Spirit. Y'all go impact the people. You know what I mean? So I think that's important for us to understand too, that we have a role in time. And I think we have to really understand that we are living in the last days, because I don't know if y'all believe that, but I do. It is a blessing to be in this time that we're in. As bad as it can seem, there's opportunity here,
Right.
Yeah.
right? The world is chaotic. When there's chaos, there's opportunity.
Agreed. I've heard that.
there's opportunity for us to be able to preach the gospel.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like this stuff is going, hey, yo, open this stuff that's happening. Look at this word. It's showing exactly what's happening. You know what I mean? Like there's opportunity for us to preach the gospel. So I think it's important for us to be bold about the gospel, but also be confident. There's no need to be, if they don't want to receive it, Jesus said, all right, you
Dust
did
the
your
dirt
part.
off your
You know
feet,
what I mean?
right?
That's it. So I think it's important for us to be continue to preach the word and just be confident in who God called us to be.
Agreed. So let's move forward. What are some common mistakes that churches make when structuring a men's ministry?
So I was a men's leader, and I was intentional about how we structured the men's ministry. I don't think there's no right and wrong way to do it. You know what I mean? But I was very intentional about it. The way I did it, I thought it was pretty cool. We always didn't do it at the church. Depending, if your church is big, obviously you have to do it at the church. But we would, the way I did it, I never made it focus on me. Right? Because I'm the men's pastor, it was never about me. Each month, we had it at somebody else's house, and whoever's house we hosted it at, that's who was preaching. And it was all about you telling your story. Right. So in November, I'm doing it at my house. I'm going to host. Everybody come. We're going to have, a couple hours there. We're going to eat. And then the last hour, it was you tell your testimony, and then it was open discussion. Right? And then it always was so powerful. Then the next month, it's at your house. Same impact. So it was me moving myself out of the way and empowering the men.
Yeah.
I think that's what's important about men's ministry in church in general. Let's stop making it about the person and make it about the body of Christ. So that's what my structure was, and I felt that it was not my structure, the structure that God gave me.
Right.
And I think it was very impactful.
I think a common mistake that a lot of places make is I think the men have to be at the forefront of men's ministry. To your point, I think it's important that it is imparted by and not necessarily run by, but at least I think it should be run by the men. So like if you don't have a lot of men in your church, I think it's hard.
Yes.
Because, all right, you want this structure and something like that, to your point where I think at that point you have to figure out a way to empower someone to run, and then maybe you stand to the side and you get somebody as a representative to help, or to like maybe you get somebody from another church, or you get somebody who you believe could run the ministry in the proper way.
Yes.
But I believe that it has to start with the men. I believe that it has to be with the men that are in your church, because I believe their opinion should matter.
Yes, it should.
Their opinion should matter. They should be able to express their feelings. They should be able to express where they are, their visions and stuff like that. I think you have to give them opportunity to grow. And in order to do that, you have to give them some leeway. However, you do also need structure. So I'm not saying you just let them go. But I think a lot of times because some churches don't already have that male role model or that male mentor already in place, that they kind of just like, okay, we're going to have something for the men, but we're not going to actually include the men. And I think that's the tough part. That's
so say that, how does that happen? We're going to do something for the men, but we're not include the men. Hey, break that down for me.
So I mean, so basically it's more so like for leadership kind of thing. So if there's a leadership, if you have, because we talked about earlier, there aren't a lot of men in churches, right? But what will happen is you'll have boys, you'll have kids, you'll have people that the men can aspire to, or you might just have men that just walk in on Sunday.
Yep.
People just go to church at some point.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm new to the area. I always go to church.
Yep.
I want to check out a church. You know what I'm saying? And what we want to do is you want to minister to these people from the point of view of someone they can aspire to,
Yes.
someone they can grow towards or watch and emulate. However, not to say like you have to be exactly like them, but to give them an example.
Yes.
Right? To give them, so for us as Christians, we look at Jesus as the example, but to women, like Jesus is a man. So like, all right, cool. Like I look at him as the example, but I want to have a role model. So that's when we look at Esther. That's when we look at Deborah. That's when we look at Jael. You know what I'm saying? Different women in the Bible. Ruth, Naomi. Like I can go down the list. So, and this is who we try to model after. So I think you have to do the same thing in the modern tense for modern ministries. You have to give them someone who they can confide in, give them someone who they can feel comfortable talking to. To your point, feeling isolated in a community is terrible. Like,
Yeah.
if I feel isolated in a space where I'm supposed to feel free, why would I go? Like,
Yeah.
like it's like being out of jail but feeling like you're still in jail. Mm-hmm. Like it's a tough spot to be in because you don't know. I can't. Like I feel like I'm restricted.
Yep.
From doing X, Y, and Z kind of thing. So that's what I think is best. I think it's best to kind of figure out a way, or like God give you a way where you can put somebody in charge who's after God's own heart.
Yeah.
Now that I just said that, I'm thinking about David and Saul. Basically, the people wanted a king. God said, "You don't need a king. You have me.
Yeah.
I'm the King of Kings." And they were like, "No, everybody else has a king. We want a king." So he gave them Saul.
Yep.
Because that's the king they wanted. He looked cool. He was the person they wanted. He looked the part. However, God said the king that's after my own heart was David.
Yeah.
And that's why he gets David, and David becomes king. So like I think it's a more of that, basically figuring out how does God want this to go forward. And I think if we empower men, even if they're not in the proper position or in the proper space, we want to empower them and guide them to get there.
Yeah.
So that we can assist.
I think when it goes back to structure, when I've grown up, we've had men's departments.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But it was once a year,
Right.
we would have a men's service.
Right.
And somebody would come and speak on behalf of the men.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that.
But that's not men's ministry though.
Right.
But growing up, that's what men's
That's what you
ministry
saw.
was.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It was never the intentionality of men's fellowshipping. Me having a guest preacher come to preach to the men is not men's ministry. So men's departments growing up, I'm sorry if I offend anyone, that's not men's ministry.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be intentional and it needs to be relational. It needs to be a place where men can talk.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be a place, not just listen to anybody. It needs to be a place where men can pray for one another.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it needs to be a place where men can correct one another.
Right. Sure.
It needs to be a place where men can be vulnerable.
Right.
If you don't have these components, you ain't got a men's ministry.
Yeah.
And I think that's, for me, that's what
Yeah, just to piggyback on a couple of both of your points, I think that a men's ministry needs to have a leader who understands that all people involved should have a certain level of investment. As you're saying, everyone should have a voice.
Right.
But within everyone having a voice, everyone needs to know what they're thinking. So there has to be a level of teaching and education within the men's ministry.
Yep.
Right.
But also, there also has to be time for the men to share freely and get to know one another.
Yes.
And that, I believe, gives the ability to steward the people in the room.
Yep.
You know, so I think that where sometimes the mistakes happens, like you said, the men's ministry is having an outside pastor or speaker or an evangelist come in to share a good word. That's just like going to church on Sunday.
Yeah.
You know, how do you steward beyond that moment?
Right.
You know, you steward beyond that moment by having conversations, by sharing, by understanding that T. White's going through something right now and giving him space to share what he's going through so I can hear outside perspectives, right? Because I feel like, you know, and when you're feeling these emotions, which men have, right?
Occasionally.
You're feeling these things and it's a defensive space to be in, but being around other godly men, they can give you a fresh perspective on how to look at that same situation in a way that you've never been able to look at that. But in order to create that type of an environment, there has to be some trust there.
Right.
Right. There has to be a little bit of transparency there. And that's why I said that I think that Jesus was intentional in only having 12 disciples so that he could build that familiarity because all of these individuals that he chose, didn't like each other right off rip.
Not at
it's
all.
like, yo, wait a minute, you got a tax collector? Like, I don't like this dude.
Right.
But once he got to know him beyond his job title,
Right.
you're like, oh man, right?
Yep.
So you build that community, and you're able to steward between one another, you know, all the gifts that you have, right?
Yes.
And everyone is built differently. So the things that I can bring to this collective are going to be different than the tools and the gifts that you guys have.
Yep.
But I may not be comfortable sharing my gifts if I don't have the space to openly communicate those things. So
Right.
I think there's beauty in having a small kind of a grassroots start to something, and then having it build from there,
Yep.
but building it with the comfort of getting to really know
Yes.
everyone in the space.
Amen. Amen.
And I don't want to take away from other churches that may not have the capacity or may not have the membership in their men's department to do these things. So that's why I brought up bringing in somebody else. But to your point, I don't think it should be somebody comes and preaches on a men's Sunday.
But even if it's 3 of y'all, that's okay.
So yeah, but what I'm saying is I think it should be fellowship. So I know what it used to happen. I remember my grandfather and a couple other churches used to do it. They used to get together and go to Cracker Barrel. I despise Cracker Barrel. No offense. No offense. It's just not for me. But they used to go to Cracker Barrel just so they could talk, so they could have breakfast together and just kind of get familiar with everybody and have that fellowship so you would feel comfortable talking. And I think that could be a great place to have men's ministry. It doesn't have to be at the church. It could be at a bowling alley. It could be at this event, like where y'all just sit and y'all just having a good time and you're just talking.
Yes.
Because we're not in the church setting doesn't mean God isn't present. The Bible says where 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, there he is in the midst. So it doesn't matter where we're at.
Bro, at our last men's fellowship we were bowling.
Right.
Yeah.
We went bowling, but it got so good in conversation, bro.
Stop bowling.
We stopped bowling.
Forget bowling.
All together.
We had supposed to have 2 games. We played 1 game and we was like, all right, yo, we good.
Right.
But it got so good
Right,
because conversation was happening. And it was a beautiful thing. But I think we're gonna wrap this one up, right?
Yeah. I think before we go, though, I just want to share, if you don't have a strong men's ministry or you don't have a large men's presence, that doesn't mean that you can't go outside of your walls and create that ministry for yourself.
Yes.
If we can get 2 or 3 small ministries together, if there's only 4 people in your church or 3 people in your church, why can't we reach out to one another and build, right?
Yes.
It's like being in the same fraternity, but having different chapters.
Yep.
Right.
You know what I mean? We can all get together and celebrate as different chapters that all believe the same thing and have the same philosophy.
Absolutely.
So we can kind of share those things and build it together so that we can build the type of community that can steward the right kind of growth.
I love that. And it's not just with men's ministry. I feel like if you know a church, and we'll close it, if you know a church is strong in a certain area that you're lacking in, reach out.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'll leave it at that.
Absolutely. So that's where we're going to end it for this episode. As always, keep building.
Peace.
I'm working on the